All right. Good afternoon and welcome to the Retail Warranty Reimbursement webinar, where we're going to talk about applying for retail markups and increasing your rates. My name is Dan Lewismith. I'm General Counsel with the Minnesota Automobile Dealers Association, and I'm joined today by our two presenters, Keith Gitman and Ken Lohr, both from Bellavia Blatt. Bellavia Blatt is MADA's longstanding retail warranty reimbursement vendor to assist dealers in maximizing their labor and parts markup retail warranty reimbursement rate. And I'm going to turn it over to them in just a minute to present on all the ins and outs of our law and how the warranty reimbursement submission process works. But before that, I just want to briefly touch base on where we're at in the state of Minnesota. For years and years, we were like other states that had sort of a weak warranty reimbursement statute in our body of franchise law that said dealers were entitled to like rate for their door rate, and it didn't really have any teeth to it. So MADA fought long and hard over several years, and in 2018 we were able to pass a bill that brings us to our existing warranty reimbursement law that follows what many other states do, where you go through an exercise of submitting warranty-like repairs through 100 ROs, and through that you establish your warranty parts and labor reimbursement rate. It was a hard-fought battle, and over the last 4 years since we've had that law in place, many dealerships have taken advantage of that. Dozens of dealerships have worked with Bellavia Blatt to see a significant lift in their bottom line. So we're excited to be joining you guys today and educating you on the state of our law and how it can be a benefit to your dealership. And we would encourage you to not only utilize the statute to increase your margins and profit, but to reach out to Bellavia Blatt, and they can explain more about how they can help you do that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith and Ken, and we'll get going on the meat and potatoes of the webinar.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan. I appreciate the introduction. I'm Keith Given. I'm the managing attorney at Bellavia Blatt. Ken and I are really excited to be here today, and thank everyone for joining the webinar. It's always a pleasure working with the team at MADA and serving as the exclusive provider of retail warranty reimbursement for the dealer members. We're here to discuss retail warranty reimbursement. It's a really key area that's important for dealers to fully understand, as it greatly impacts overall dealer profits. Whether you're here to obtain a general overview of the process or the overall benefits of filing these submissions, we'll discuss everything you need to know. Also, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to type them in the Q&A function in Zoom, or you could always contact us after the webinar is completed to discuss it further regarding your dealership's individual needs. As far as the overview here on the next slide, just to give you a brief overview of our agenda, we'll discuss the difference between a statutory and manufacturer submission for increasing your parts and labor rates, including eligibility, timing considerations, and just the general submission process. Next, we'll also discuss some of the legal intricacies involved in the statute, how the statute will benefit you as a dealer, and some tips and best practices to ensure that you're maximizing the reimbursement rates.
All right, thanks, Keith. And Dan, thanks for the introduction. We're gonna, like Keith said, we're gonna talk about several of the meat and potatoes of a statutory submission. But before we get there, you know, we're in a unique situation today with COVID and constraints on our inventories, which is a huge problem for a lot of us. But of course, grosses are up per unit, so that's a good thing, but we just don't have any inventory on the ground. But some of the other things that have affected dealers, not just now, but over the years, you know, we have a lot of online selling now, the inventory constraints that we talked about, allocation issues. We're all faced with facility upgrades and demands from the manufacturer, whether they're reasonable or unreasonable. You know, they can result in millions of dollars worth of upgrades that we're required to do. You know, you have stair-step bonus programs some of the manufacturers still have that we have to deal with. And of course, we have our audits and chargebacks, whether they're sales incentive chargebacks or warranty claim chargebacks. But more importantly, we're coming into a new era of vehicles with EVs coming on board, and we're not real sure what's going to happen with our service departments when we have all these electric vehicles on the road. So we don't know, we're unsure as to what types of maintenance are going to be required. Is it going to reduce the visits to our service drive? Are our ROs counts going to go down? Amounts per sales per RO, is that going to go down? Hours per RO? All those things are going to affect us in the future. So there's one thing that we can be sure of and what we can control, courtesy of the statute, is what we receive from the manufacturers for our warranty claims. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. And as many of you know, warranty reimbursement at retail, it enables the dealers to receive reimbursement for warranty and labor at retail customer rates. Now, that doesn't mean that you can just declare what your door rate is. If your door rate's $150 an hour, you just can't tell the manufacturer, hey, I'm charging my customers $150 an hour. That's what I want you to pay me. That's not how it works, because effectively, very few of us charge our customers $150 an hour for a qualified repair, and we'll talk about that. You know, it's essentially our effective rate is what we're collecting on qualified repairs. So we try and bridge the gap between what the manufacturer is paying you now for your labor and what we are actually charging our customers for the labor and how the statute applies. And it can make a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars in net profit for your dealership. In fact, we've done some large market dealerships where the numbers were in the millions. We recently did a submission for a dealer in a very large market where he received almost $2 million in additional gross profit. So these numbers can get very, very large, even in small dealerships. It's a relative number, it's very significant. So with that said, now all 50 states, and including Minnesota, has a really good statute now. As Dan mentioned, it was amended in 2018, and it took some of the ambiguity out of the statute. It was very vague, but now it's very specific, and it's to the dealer's advantage. So even if you filed in the past and received increases, it's time to take another look at it too, because the statute allows you to file on a yearly basis. And again, there is, Keith mentioned, there's a difference between a statutory filing and a local labor rate filing. And as we all know, over the years, we've all filed for rate increases, labor rate increases with the manufacturer, non-statutory. And when we do that, we lose control. We give control to the manufacturer when we do that. For example, let's say your door rate is $150 an hour, and you jump through all the hoops that the manufacturer wants you to go through, and you establish your effective repair rate of, say, $140, and you submit all that to the manufacturer. Well, in most cases, they won't pay you $140 an hour. They'll say, you know, hey, Mr. Dealer, we think you're worth $125 an hour, and that's what they'll pay you. They get to decide that. And with a statutory filing, they don't have that control anymore. Once we legally establish what your rate is, that's what the manufacturer is obligated to pay. Now, on parts, that's a different issue, because you could never file for an increase for parts, a non-statutory increase. Prior to the statutes being in effect, you could ask the manufacturer 1,000,000 times for an increase. It's just not going to happen on parts. And most of us receive cost plus 40%. Some manufacturers do pay MSRP. And even those manufacturers that pay MSRP on warranty parts, in most cases, we charge more than that through a parts matrix. So we can even increase that for those dealers that receive that. And Toyota's one of them, Volkswagen's another. We can receive increases for Mercedes-Benz, et cetera. So there's opportunity everywhere with retail warranty reimbursement.
Thanks so much, Ken. So originally, manufacturers set warranty reimbursement rates as what would be deemed reasonable. However, it was kind of unfair as these rates were much lower than the retail customer rates. So dealers began objecting to these guidelines, presenting legal challenges to level the playing field. So over time, states began to pass laws permitting dealers to obtain the retail rates of reimbursement for warranty work. As Ken mentioned a little earlier, currently all 50 states now provide statutory filing guidelines to help the dealers obtain the retail rates. Also keep in mind the state statutes provide for retail reimbursement for both labor and parts rates as well. So Minnesota dealers are entitled to the same labor rates, parts markup rates on warranty work as they are for customer pay, and the law permits dealerships to apply for these increases.
Great. In Minnesota, like I mentioned before, you can file once a year for both parts and labor. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So typically, dealers increase their retail rates at least once a year. And many dealers, and this slide demonstrates that, many dealers have filed, but 80% of them fail to file on an annual basis for an increase. So that's very important to note. And there's an awareness issue out there too, because there's still 30% of the dealers have never filed under the statute for whatever reason, whether it's awareness or whether it's other reasons. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. But for those dealers that have filed, most of them have not maximized their results unless they've used a professional that does this for a living. That's what we do all day long, and we know how to maximize your results. So if you're not getting what our average client gets, and again, this is just an average. An average Bellavia Blatt client receives cost plus 70 to 75% on parts. And of course, that's dependent on what you charge your customers and what your pricing strategy is. But that's the average. And the average Bellavia Blatt client receives 93 to 95% of their retail door rate in a warranty rate adjustment. So that's important to note too. So that's just average. Some are more, some are less. The next slide I wanted to show you, these are some actual numbers from a dealer that we obtained increases for. And this is a medium size Ford dealer, and I'm not going to put their name up there. But of course, I'm going to put the actual numbers. These are real numbers. And you'll see a before, which is in the blue column. And to the right of that, you're going to see after the increases that we obtained for the dealer and what the results were in the third column. But the dealer received, were sold approximately $1 million a year in warranty parts sales. And their gross was roughly $312,000. Which was cost plus 40%, and the margin was 29.8%, the retention on warranty parts. Labor sales were roughly $1.2 million at $119.81 an hour. So they were doing about 10,000 hours a year in warranty labor sales. After we filed and received approval, the dealer received cost plus 75.4%, which resulted in roughly $275,000 in additional warranty parts gross. And on the labor side, we got him an increase to $133.70, which got him another $140,000 roughly in labor gross. So that totaled over $400,000 a year. And this is a medium-sized Ford dealer. But what's really important to remember is how this affects the valuation of your dealership. So if you add $400,000 a year to your net profit, in this particular instance, this actually happened. This dealer sold his dealership roughly about a year ago, and he received the benefit of that additional net profit in the form of blue sky. And he got 5 times net for his blue sky. So think about that for a second. 5 times 400,000, that's an extra $2 million in the valuation of his dealership. And that's what he received. So we like to say it's the gift that keeps on giving. So it's very important, not just in the short term, but the long term, and it's very meaningful in the valuation of your business and what it's worth moving forward. So that's important to note. We want to talk a little bit about, not spend a whole lot of time. We know you're busy. We're not going to go through step-by-step process, but we want to give you an overview of what's involved in the preparation, because it may sound simple and it looks fairly straightforward, but in reality, it's not. It's quite complicated and very, very time consuming. So these are just some of the steps that we go through to prepare your submission. And then keep in mind, this is a legal issue. So we're filing a submission under the statute. It has to follow the statute, and it also has to follow the rules of each manufacturer. Each manufacturer has different nuances, so, and what they deem to be a warranty-like repair. So the first thing that we do for our clients is we analyze the data in their DMS. And the reason we do that is because in Minnesota, and like most other states, we can use repair order data that is up to 180 days old, so 6 months. So we have an opportunity within those 6 months worth of data to select the best repair order sequence that will get you the best results. So that's really important, because you just don't want to go into your DMS and just randomly select a sequence of repair orders that may not benefit you. So for example, if we're taking a look back of 6 months and we're doing parts and labor at your store, we may look at December and find that the parts result is going to be the best for December, but labor is going to be October. So in many cases, we use different sets and different sequences of repair orders to get you the best results. So we spend a lot of time doing that. And all of our analysts that are on our team, we're all fixed ops people. We've all been in the dealership, and we all have extensive experience in fixed ops, including myself. So that's the first thing we do. And then, of course, we extract the number of repair orders that it typically takes to extract 100 qualified repair orders. And as Dan mentioned, the statute specifies the 100 qualified repair orders. What that means is a qualified repair order is simply a customer paid a retail repair order that would have been covered under warranty had the vehicle been under warranty. So a good example of that is, let's just say a retail customer comes into your service drive and they have a leaking water pump, and they pay us $500 to replace the water pump. Well, that would be a qualified repair, because had that vehicle been under warranty, it would have been covered under warranty. So that's an example of a qualified repair. An example of a non-qualified repair would be a typical maintenance item. Let's say they came in for a tune-up or a 30,000 mile service or a transmission fluid exchange or something like that. That's not something that's covered under the manufacturer's warranty. So those items would be excluded, which is a benefit to us, because typically those repairs and maintenance, those are done at much less than what your door rate is. So if your door rate's $150 an hour, it's very rare that we see our dealers charging $150 an hour to do maintenance work. So that's a good thing. So out of that, we extract those 100 qualified repair orders. And typically we look at anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 repair orders, depending on the franchise. So what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you have a General Motors franchise. The repair incidence of a GM product is a little bit higher than it is a Toyota or a Honda product. That's just the facts. That's the way it is. So it takes us maybe 1,000 to 1,200 repair orders of all types to extract the 100 qualified, as opposed to a Toyota or a Honda dealer where it can take up to 3,000 repair orders to extract the 100 qualified. So that in itself demonstrates how time consuming that is. So just imagine if you're a service manager or you're a parts manager or you're a warranty administrator and you have a business to run every day, trying to scan through and review 2,000 repair orders. That's going to take a lot of time because it takes us roughly 40 hours of work, dedicated work, to prepare a submission, a statutory submission. And then, of course, once we extract those repair orders, we have to identify the number of qualified repair orders by reviewing every single RO. And we have to validate the parts that are used. So we have to make sure that we have a parts catalog available to make sure that we have valid part numbers, OEM part numbers, because you can't use a repair order that has aftermarket parts. That's not a warranty-like repair. So those are excluded. And then, of course, we have to validate that each one of those qualified repairs, it complies with Minnesota state statute. So you have to have a pretty good understanding of the statute and understand what is qualified, what's excluded. And of course, Minnesota has lots of advantageous exclusions for the dealer, and you have to know what those are so you can take advantage of that. And then, of course, you have to calculate the parts markup and the labor markup for each and every one of those repairs. And then you have to calculate the markup and the rate for 100 qualified repairs. So that kind of illustrates, the complications of it. And then, of course, you have to make sure that your submission is absolutely perfect. It's definitely, I don't like to say this, but it's not horseshoes. It is perfection, because the manufacturers do not want to pay you retail pricing for your warranty claims. They don't want to do that. So they look for ways to reject your submission. So if you make one single mistake in your submission, that's cause for rejection. Not saying that they'll reject your submission out of hand, but in many cases, if you have too many mistakes, they will completely reject the submission. And we've seen, Keith and I have seen in our practice, we've had many clients come to us that have submitted on their own, that they were completely rejected. 100% manufacturer said, sorry, too bad, come back next year. So that becomes a real problem. How do we handle that? So we're involved in many of those cases. So it really becomes an issue of, do you really want to, number one, spend the time doing that that's required? Number two, take the risk of making those mistakes that are very easy to make. And it's not that we're any smarter than anybody in the room. It's just that this is what we do every day, and we have a very good understanding of how it's done and how it needs to be done. So other considerations, like I talked about, what's a qualified repair order? We already discussed that. What repair lines can be legitimately excluded from the calculation? And that's all dependent on what's warranty like, based on the manufacturer's warranty and based on the statute in Minnesota. So even though it could be a warranty-like repair under the warranty, the statute could exclude it specifically. So the statute controls and it overrides that. So you have to understand the statute as well. And of course, state rules, they require that additional data to be reported, other things that you have to include with your submission. How do we handle discounts? You have to account for discounts. So the statutes do not have a methodology of calculating discounts or accounting for discounts. So that's by manufacturer. They have their own requirements. So you have to understand what those are too, and how you calculate those discounts and apply them. Again, after that's all done, you have to evaluate the gross margin on all the qualified repair orders and come up with and establish what your rates are and what your parts markup is. So that gives you an overview of the nuts and bolts on how to actually do a submission. And Keith, go ahead and talk about submitting the request.
Thanks so much, Ken. So just to kind of sum some things up, when preparing to submit your claim to the manufacturer, there's 3 key points to remember: notification, accuracy, and experience. First, you need to identify the proper points of contact. Always send proper notification to the manufacturer that you are indeed making the submissions. Next, it's crucial to conduct the proper data analysis, which Ken went through, and identify the appropriate ROs. Perfection is so important. Otherwise, as Ken said, the submission can just be rejected. Lastly, it's experience. Mistakes are likely to occur if you have someone do your submission that doesn't have the necessary experience or knowledge regarding the process or the applicable statutory guidelines. So these are really, the main points to remember when you're going through the process of submitting your request.
Right, great. Some of the ways we like to talk about maximizing your results that I mentioned before, one of the ways is obtaining or extracting the right sequence of repair orders from your DMS that will absolutely help you maximize your results. But there's some other things that you can do to prepare for a submission. So understanding that you're going to prepare, some of the things that you can do is are you using a parts pricing matrix, for example, or are you just charging MSRP for your parts? Most of us out there in the dealership world, we use some type of parts pricing matrix in our shop, not at our retail counter, which doesn't apply, by the way. Retail counter parts sales don't come into the picture. It's only repair order sales. So it's important to understand, is your matrix working for you? Or do you not use a matrix? It may be time to consider installing a parts pricing matrix to maximize not only your retail results, but your retail warranty reimbursement results. So if you don't have a matrix and you install a matrix, it's going to benefit you on your retail business and your warranty business. One of the other considerations is, do you use a labor pricing grid? And for folks that aren't familiar with that, you're welcome to contact me and I'll help you through the labor pricing grid issue. But essentially, it works for your repair type work, and it gives you a little bit of a higher rate for the complicated work that we do, the work that our competitors, our independent competitors don't do, the reasons why the customer comes to us for those check engine lights and those complicated things. And the other thing is, surprisingly, a lot of dealers don't look at their local labor market to see what the market actually is. I recently had a client, and I'm not going to name the market, but he told me what his rate was, his door rate, and I knew that market, and I knew that he was low, and I said to the dealer, I said, I strongly suggest that you survey your local labor market and then come back to me and let me know what that number is. And he did. About a week later, he came back and he was $30 below his market. So we delayed that filing until he implemented the correct pricing strategy on his labor, so that maximized his results. So many of us don't do that. We're busy during the day. We have things to do. Running a dealership is complicated. There's lots of different things, the wheels are turning and lots of things moving, and it's very dynamic. So some of the things, the basics, we forget to do. So that's important to remember. Go to the basics and make sure that you have the right pricing strategy in place that will maximize your results. Some of the other things that we'll talk about briefly, limit or eliminate discounts on retail repair type work. So what I mean by that is, like the water pump example, don't discount that type of work. That's the brain surgery that we do in our dealership, that people come to us because we are the experts when it comes to the complicated work, such as drivability issues or engine issues or transmission repairs or electrical repairs. Those are the types of things that we do extremely well that other folks can't do. So why should we discount that type of work? So if you're going to discount work, certainly discount the maintenance work. That's the highly competitive work that, the independents do, the Jiffy Lubes, those types of things that we have to compete with. It's okay to discount that work because it won't affect you and your results on a retail warranty submission, because those items, for the most part, are excluded. But there's three that we're going to talk about briefly that aren't in a lot of cases. And we'll talk about how you can help maximize your results with those. But again, if you do any discounting, discount the parts when you apply for labor. Let's say you're just looking to apply for a labor increase, you're fine with parts, and you know you're going to do that. Well, prior to filing, let's make sure that if you do any discounting, you're not going to discount the parts, you're just going to discount the labor, and vice versa. If you're filing for parts, discount the labor, etc. And clearly label the discount as either parts or labor, because if you don't do that, if you just label it as a discount, you have to apply the discount to both parts and labor, and that will affect you as well. And also make sure that you apply discounts to specific repair lines. And what I mean by that is, let's say you apply a discount to that water pump, to the line on the water pump. Well, that will affect you, as opposed to applying a discount on the oil change line, where that's specific to that line and you don't have to allocate that discount to your water pump. So those are some things to consider as well. Now, three things that we want to talk about generally that affect most dealers are the 3 Bs, I call them: brakes, bulbs, and batteries. In a lot of cases, in most cases, batteries and bulbs are included as warranty-like. In some cases, brakes are included. Namely, Ford Motor Company requires you to include brakes in your submission because they're warranty-like. They will cover them for the first 12 months or 12,000 miles. FCA, Stellantis dealers, that's another example of brakes being included. So you have to take a look at your brake pricing. You have to take a look at your battery pricing and your bulb pricing. So those are the three things. Batteries, they have to be included. So if we're doing a labor submission, you might want to consider charging maybe 2 or 3 tenths to replace that battery, or nothing at all. If you have a quick lane or you have a fast lube, maybe you just install batteries for free. You don't charge any labor. So that way you wouldn't have to include it on a labor submission. Now on the parts side, of course, batteries generally carry a lower margin. So if you normally charge labor for that battery, maybe you don't charge the labor and apply that labor to the parts price. That'll give you a higher margin. So that's one way to think about it. Brake pads, like I discussed before, that can really, really negatively impact your results. And normally we pay our technicians 2 hours in labor to put pads on and change and resurface rotors. You may want to reconsider that. Maybe you don't pay your technicians 2 hours in labor, or maybe you increase the labor charge to your customer. But at any rate, you have to take a look at what that effective rate is for your brake work, because that will negatively impact your results if you do a lot of brakes, because you have to include them. And the same with bulbs. I'm doing a submission today, in fact, and I have a dealer that flags his technicians 5 tenths to put a bulb in. $19.95 in labor to the client. So that works out to $40 an hour, and they change a lot of bulbs and they have to be included. So that's something that you have to take a look at and give it some consideration. Maybe it's not 5 tenths, maybe it's 2 tenths at your door rate. It's not a huge deal to the customer. So those are 3 things, examples that will impact you on a negative basis if you don't look at that and consider your pricing strategy for those 3 Bs, the brakes, bulbs, and batteries. Alignments. Alignments, you always have to include if they're needed to complete a covered repair or a warranty-like repair. For example, if you change a ball joint or a tie rod, you have to realign the car after you do that. So the alignment has to be included. So typically we do alignments at a greatly discounted price, say $129.95, and we pay our technicians an hour and a half worth of labor. So that will hurt. So if you're doing a repair, a suspension repair that requires an alignment, a consideration would be to include the alignment into the repair. In other words, let's just say the repair of the ball joints is 3 hours worth of labor. and you charge you flag your technicians an additional hour and a half for that alignment on a separate line. Don't make a separate line, pay the technician the extra hour or an hour and a half at your door rate and include it in the line that you replace the ball joints on or the suspension component. That way you won't have to deal with that heavily discounted alignment. And of course, some manufacturers, namely FCA and Toyota, they require the inclusion of routine alignments. So in other words, if you're replacing tires on a customer's vehicle, you typically sell them an alignment on a separate line, and you have to include that with those manufacturers. So that can affect you as well. So consider what you're charging your customers and what the flag time is to your technician. And of course, some manufacturers require the inclusion of wiper blades, excuse me. So maybe the consideration is you don't charge any labor when you put wiper blades on, and which is fair anyway. It's not a big deal to put some wiper blades on a customer's car. And just charge the retail price MSRP for the wiper blades and don't discount them. And again, last, I see this a lot, diagnostic work. So for example, a customer comes in with an issue and the customer decides that they're not going to repair the vehicle for whatever reason. So we call that a decline repair, right? Many dealers charge a discounted rate for that diagnostic time. So that's something that I wouldn't recommend doing. You're diagnosing the vehicle, charge your door rate for that. So if you're flagging your technician an hour's worth of labor and your rate's $150, charge the customer $150 instead of $99.95 or whatever that discounted rate is if you do that. Because those, in many cases, most manufacturers, we have to include that diagnostic time even though we didn't make a repair. So those are just some of the things to consider when we're preparing you to do a submission, to take a look at and make those adjustments before we submit, because they will help you. And of course, maximizing your results, like Keith talked about, choose a qualified professional to do the work for you. Whether it's us, we want it to be us, obviously, but if it's not, make sure that you choose a qualified professional and one that has legal experience, because this is a legal issue. So most of the vendors out there today, they're not law firms. They don't have that. They don't have that backing of a law firm that we do. So that's a consideration. And of course, we work with you to optimize your pricing strategy so we can maximize your results. And we're all fixed ops people. Other vendors don't do this. They just take your data and they go ahead and perform the submission, and whatever the number is, it is. Well, we work with you to maximize your results. And again, our analysts, we select the best repair order sequence to maximize those results. And we all have extensive fixed ops experience. And last, we charge a very reasonable flat fee. We don't charge a base fee plus a percentage of your increase or anything like that. There's some vendors out there that'll charge 10% of the increase for the next year. For example, that one dealer that I mentioned, we got a $2 million a year increase with a 10% fee plus a base fee. It would have cost that dealer over $200,000 to do a submission. So we don't do that. We just charge a reasonable flat fee. We don't try to become your partner for the next year and take a piece of your gross. It's just not fair. We don't believe in doing that. Keith?
So as Ken said, you want to retain a professional like us that would save you time to maximize profits. And, with the backing of a national law firm with a team of attorneys and a team of analysts. The analysts, like Ken said, they're all fixed operations experts. They've been in the automotive industry for a very long time, and this is what they do all day, every day. And part of our service of being a law firm as well is, if there is a rejection, while we never anticipate it, should there be, you have attorneys behind you that are there to help you with the process, which is included in that reasonable flat fee. So, moving on here, to always use legal counsel to submit your applications. It's a very time-intensive, work-intensive process, and applying for retail warranty reimbursement involves the practice of law and a precise analytical ability. So it's crucial to use counsel who's knowledgeable in this specific subject matter and well-versed in the legal intricacies involved in Minnesota and other states as well. We recommend to have an attorney prepare your submission on your letterhead, have your attorney respond to any objections that may be asserted against your submission. And by having your attorney involved, you can ensure that all the pertinent issues are raised and addressed thoroughly without having the need to retain outside counsel going with one of the other vendors should that happen.
Great. Thanks, Keith. Important to remember.
Yeah.
Lastly, one of the things we get a lot questions about is what about retaliation? Some of the objections that we get from dealers that don't want to apply for retail warranty reimbursement. You know, most of these statutes have been on the books for quite some time. There's a few new ones, but the manufacturers have been dealing with this issue for years and years and years, since the mid 80s when the first statute came in place. So this is nothing new to the manufacturers. We don't have retaliation issues. You know, many dealers say, hey, if I submit, are they going to change my allocation? Are they going to audit me? Or are they going to do incentive audits or warranty audits, things like that? We just have not seen that issue. So in our experience, nothing to worry about. And again, this is just routine business for the manufacturers. In fact, they have teams of auditors. That's all they do. They're dedicated to retail warranty reimbursement. That's all they do, is review the submissions. And we're on a first name basis with these folks. They know who we are. We deal with them on a daily basis. We have great relationships with all the manufacturers. So when we send a submission in, they know it's one of ours. They know it's a quality submission. So objections such as retaliation, just not out there. And the other one is we can do it ourselves. Well, okay, I guess you could, but like I mentioned before, it takes roughly 40 hours of our work to do one submission. So if we're doing labor for you, it takes roughly 40 hours for us to do that. That's dedicated time from an experienced professional that does it every day. So to ask a parts or service manager that's trying to run a business that is very busy, you're juggling many balls during the day, and you're trying to do one of these submissions, it'll take you a long time to get it done, and you're distracted always. So do your folks have 40 hours worth of dedicated time to sit down and do this and do it mistake-free? And that's the issue. So it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to try and do it yourself. Keith and I, we see submissions often. We've got a few now on our plate that dealers have done themselves and they were rejected. They come to us to help them deal with that. So that's not something that you really want to do. It's just not worth it. Keith?
Thanks so much, Ken, again. So as we're finishing up the presentation, I just want to reemphasize a couple of points. Filing a statutory submission is your choice as a dealer, and this choice can significantly increase profits for your dealership immediately and for the future if done properly. As we've stated, it's important to use a vendor such as us who has extensive legal and fixed operations experience. It'll allow you to have a team behind you who can advise on the legal side, the analytical aspects of the data review, the submission, and whatever issues may arise. Once you do receive an approval, the rate increases will drive significant profits now and moving forward. You can always resubmit, as Ken went through part of the process. You can always resubmit for additional increases pursuant to the statute to continue receiving higher parts and labor rates and additional profits to your dealership. As I said earlier, if you have any questions, I noticed that there aren't any questions in the Q&A right now. If you'd rather contact us directly once the presentation is done, there is our contact information. Please feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to discuss the benefits of this service and how it could help your dealership. Couple final points. Lastly, we are running a special for webinar attendees. If you sign both parts and labor retainers by the end of the day tomorrow, we'll provide you with a $1,000 discount. If you sign up for either parts or labor by the end of tomorrow, we'll give you a $500 discount. So that's just what we're offering for those of you who have been able to attend. Ken, Dan, Mike, thank you everyone. Unless any of you have anything else to add, we appreciate everyone's time and attention today, and we look forward to helping you out.
Great. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Ken, both for all your information and advice for our dealers. I just want to echo to the participants in the webinar one more time. MADA takes very seriously endorsing a vendor, whether it's for warranty reimbursement or any other product. We go through an exhaustive search and vetting process to make sure that our recommendation means something. And Bellavia Blatt has served Minnesota dealers well for 4 years now. And I would encourage all of you to get learned counsel on your side and reach out to Bellavia Blatt. As you can see through the presentation, it can get complicated pretty quick. I always describe the submissions as kind of 2 parts accounting, 1 part legal. You got to go through the math exercise, but if and when you inevitably get a little bit of resistance from the manufacturer and there's some back and forth, it's important to have that legal component on your side so that you can push back and make it clear to the manufacturer. We as a dealer are just enforcing our statutory rights, and it's fair and equitable under the statute. And I can't underscore enough how beneficial having attorneys in your corner is that, quite frankly, the other vendors that are in this space just can't offer. So again, you have Bellavia Blatt's information on the screen. I encourage you to reach out, and I want to once again thank Keith and Ken for your presentation today. And of course, you're always welcome to reach out to me for any additional questions on this or to get you guys in touch with the folks at Bellavia Blatt. Thank you again to all the attendees, and I hope you found the webinar beneficial. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone.